Well, welcome everyone to the Q&A for the documentary film, The Bikes of Wrath. My name is Sarah Poppitz, and I'm the membership manager for the California Film Institute. Before we start, I just want to take a second to thank our members. Our community of members is at the very core of what we do and who we are. Without them, we wouldn't be who we are without them, and it's their passion for film and story that fuels and informs our mission. So thank you to them. I want to point out, take a sec, everybody on your screen, at the bottom of your window, there's a Q&A and chat button. So, you know, at any time during the conversation, pop a question in there. Towards the end, I'll open it up and read those to the guys. And if the chat function as well, if you just want to say hi and that you like the film, it's lovely to pop that there. I want to introduce our lovely Q&A panelists here. We have the directors, Cameron Ford and Charlie Turnbull. Welcome.
How you doing? Thanks for having us. It's exciting.
Thanks for having us.
We're so happy you could join us. Tell us where you guys are coming from.
I'm beaming in from Melbourne, Australia, and it's about midday over here.
And I'm based in Austin, Texas now, and have been for about 2 years. And it's a 9 p.m. on a, what are we, Friday or Saturday? I don't know.
We've lost track.
Well,
It's Saturday here, Sunday in Australia, and yeah, thank you guys for joining us. I love
pleasure.
So much. I love so many things about this film. I love the music. I love the edit. The animation is great.
It is.
The message of this film of just overwhelming kindness and humanity is it's just so great. So I want to thank you both for making this film and sharing that message. It's really, really important. I think now more than ever. Right now, it just feels timely. I also love about this film that it comes from an outsider's perspective. I think it can maybe be hard for us sometimes as Americans to be objective about our own country. So you guys coming in as Australians can really get this nice bigger view. So my first question I wanted to ask you both is, first, how much time prior to this journey had you spent in the States? And then how did this trip affect your kind of preconceived notions about America?
Yeah, I mean, I both Cameron and I had spent a fair bit of time in the US. I think we were both kind of fairly interested in this country and just the variety that can be found in the US. And so we'd both traveled here multiple times and spent quite a bit of time, I guess, on the East and West Coast, not as much time in the middle of the country. So that was like a big part of the desire and attraction towards the trip. And, you know, obviously we went in and didn't really know what to expect and had very little, or had no plan really. And we're obviously quite blown away by what we encountered and the way people treated us. And, you know, it's interesting because we made this film, the ride was in 2015, it's now 2020 and the country seems fairly different now. But I think for me, the preconceived notion that it changed for me was not to kind of have these preconceived notions so much and to try and be really open-minded and to go in and kind of let go of stereotypes and try and have these encounters and these experiences and be open and willing to kind of, you know, not write people off. So that was kind of the biggest takeaway for me about the US, but applied more broadly as well.
Yeah.
Something that I experienced in an earlier trip before doing Bikes of Wrath was a road trip across America, but obviously a road trip in a vehicle. And what I learned through that was, like, you're in this bubble for 8-9 hours. You get out, you have a quick sort of connection or experience with a small town, and then you jump back in the car and you're on your own again. But what it showed me was that when you do pop out of the car and you have that sort of small moment of connection with a group of people that you might bump into, it's like, what if you know, you're not in the time capsule traveling along the road, but you're actually moving at a pace where every encounter and every engagement that you could have could be more meaningful, and you're doing it at a slower pace. So that was something that we always discussed as a group. It's like, yes, the Joad family do it in a car, but the way that you can slow down a trip and engage with every experience that you're having, moving at a bicycle pace is what allows you that access and that like ground level experience that you've all seen in the film.
Yeah, that must have been so attractive to you, Cam, as a documentary filmmaker, that opportunity to like really slow down and enmesh yourself with the people that you're encountering. I'm curious, in the movie, you know, you say Charlie and Ollie, that the book was your favorite book, but I'm curious how this group of guys came together. Like what was, how did you five, how were the five chosen?
The five was, well, so Charlie's known for doing lots of wonderful, crazy adventures. And back in like 2013, what trip were you doing? And anyway, I was going to come along and film it, and then it clashed with another project that I was working on, and then we just started to sort of conjure up, well, what is the next thing that we could do that's a crazy adventure that we actually bring cameras along for, and we film it for real. We turn it into an actual documentary. So I think I mean, Charlie, you can speak more about how the team was assembled, but I think partially necessity, partially who was up for it and who was available, and who wanted to take on such a crazy adventure.
That's pretty much it. I think there wasn't a long list to select from, but whoever wanted to go, really.
I can speak to Red, who's the main cinematographer on the film and on the trip. He'd heard about, through a friend of mine, a mutual friend, he'd heard about this trip and this film that we were going to make. And I'd met him once, and he'd filed it away in the back of his mind. And then Charlie and I were chatting a lot about it, and we were like, we need a dedicated cinematographer who can also ride a bicycle. We don't want them in a car while we're on bikes. It has to be all together as this group. Same amount of money, same amount of transportation, same type of transportation. And then when I picked up the phone and called him, it's like he'd been waiting for the call for 9 months. He knew it was coming. And within 30 seconds, he's like, yes, I'm in. I will do this. Which is crazy, because I'd met him once.
He had to probably cycle twice as much, because I would imagine he's, you know, going ahead to get the shot. Or is that right?
He carried less, but he cycled more. Yeah.
Wow. Well, I was highly inspired by the film. I mean, when I was watching it, I immediately wanted to get on a bicycle and do something just, you know, like as crazy as this. But I was also hit with so many moments in the film where I know I wouldn't feel safe as a woman. You know, that the first scene where you got to the back of the guy's property, or just sleeping on the side of the highway. Like, I think me watching it as a woman, I was hit with this, like, you know, I don't think I would feel safe doing that. So I wanted to ask, like, how do you think this journey might have been different if it was 5 women?
Yeah,
it's a good question.
Yeah. I mean, it's really hard to say, I guess, for us. But we're very aware that we're very fortunate to be able to do a trip like this and to feel safe doing it. And it's certainly not lost on us that other people may have not had the same experience that we had, or felt safe doing it. So it's really, I mean, it's a really tough one to answer, and it's kind of sad in many ways, I think, and such a shame, because it was such an enriching experience for all of us and just life-changing, really. And to think that, you know, rightfully so, a lot of people wouldn't feel safe doing that is a real shame. I mean, or, you know, yeah.
Yeah, I don't expect, like, there's you to solve the gender equality.
Good.
It's a tall order.
Yeah, an interesting just reaction that I had to the film. At its core, this film is about an epic journey and how people how people face this catastrophic event of the Dust Bowl. So kind of to bring it into modern day or current events, do you think there's any lessons in the book or in your journey that you found that kind of has a parallel to what humans are facing now with COVID-19? You know, it's like how we as humans in society are facing this catastrophic natural disaster, yeah, like what do you see any connections in these two things?
I mean, we'd always connected it with migration and immigration around the time that we were doing the trip, that parallel that existed from the book and the Okies being unwanted when they arrived in California. Was sort of mirroring to a certain extent what we were seeing in the States back in 2015 and onwards. But I actually honestly haven't thought about this film in relation to COVID. It's a really interesting question. I'd have to think on that for a second, but do you, Charlie?
Yeah, I have a little bit. I mean, you know, people kind of talking about another Great Depression and record unemployment, and you know, it made me think of, you know, the book was published in 1939, and that was kind of the scene at the time. And I think there are a lot of kind of, you know, it's frustrating and disheartening in many ways because, you know, maybe we haven't learned that much from the Dust Bowl and from the Great Depression. But I also think there's that hope that is always there in the Grapes of Wrath, and even in the darkest times, you know, people and generally people without very much do a lot, and they give whatever they can, and that's been a heartening kind of parallel between, I think, the Grapes of Wrath and what's happening now. It does seem that there's a lot of generosity and compassion and people banding together. And there's obviously a lot of division too. You know, I'm not into that in any way, but you know, it does seem when times are toughest or hardest or bleakest, people kind of, the goodness really comes out of some people.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I just think of how much kindness you guys were shown along the way, and in whatever, as you said it really well, just when times are toughest, people tend to be the kindest. Yeah, which is just such a lovely thing about the film. Now, I was also curious, you're both Australian. I've spent a fair amount of time in Australia, so I know you're not unfamiliar with the heat and how that affects people. What made you choose the middle of summer to cycle through the southwest of America?
It was due to the fact that Leon is a firefighter and he only gets a 4-week holiday window that exists throughout his like annual calendar. And so that was the window we could do the trip. I mean, as you see in the film, we didn't give much preparation or thought to most of what transpired. And when in the seasons we were going to do this trip was no different. We just kind of said we can do it in June, July. That's when it's happening. So yeah, but I mean, at its hottest point through the Mojave Desert, it got to, in Celsius, it was 47 degrees, which is what in Fahrenheit? Like 111 or something?
115 Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
But again, it's not like we said, oh, we've got to go in June. It's going to be really hot in June. We said, oh, it's doing great. Let's go in June. And then we got to Oklahoma.
And we're like, oh, it's really hot over here.
The shop said, you should look up the temperature in the Mojave Desert right now. And we did. It was, 110 degrees that day. So
yeah. And we joke often, and it's in the episodic version of Bikes of Wrath, but in true Bikes of Wrath style, we plan to do the Mojave Desert at like 7 a.m. and we do it in the heat of the day at midday because we just couldn't get our stuff together in time. So we're riding through the Mojave Desert in like 115 degree heat at midday.
Oh my God.
Yeah, we were match fit by that point, I must say.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite lines in the whole movie is from you, Cam, when we just didn't factor in headwind.
We did. I didn't even know what it was. I did not think that it could affect a human body on a bicycle trying to go in a particular direction the way it does. Like, that's just how inexperienced I was. I can't speak on behalf of everyone else, but I thought, how hard could it be? How much extra resistance could it possibly add? And it's like, it's an absolute battle for anyone listening. Anyone that's a cyclist would know that, except I know it now. I learned it on the road.
Yeah, we also looked that up about halfway through the trip.
Yeah.
We could have, at any time, I mean, we looked up kind of cycling blogs about people who had ridden Route 66, and the advice was, everyone's advice was go west to east because there's a prevailing headwind that blows from the west. Obviously, that would have been a reversal of the route, but then we got to it really hit me when we got to a town in California called and forgive me if I mispronounce this, but it's Wahachapi, or it's kind of just as you come down towards Bakersfield, and it's got to be one of the world's largest wind turbine farms there, just spinning and spinning. So obviously like an extremely windy part of the world.
Wow.
And everyone's just watched the film, but Cheerio, the Chinese cyclist that we met at roughly the halfway point, who was the impetus for us to ditch our instruments because we're just not making any miles here. He was doing 2 days to our 1 on the road in terms of distance, because he was traveling light, but he also had a tailwind, and he was fitter than us. But all of those things sort of married into the fact that we are going in the wrong direction.
Great. It's great stuff. Interesting questions that have been asked in the Q&A. So Anonymous said, did you consider the plight of today's immigrants and refugees from the beginning, or did that emerge along the way?
I think...
Sorry, you go.
It was... Oh, no, I was just going to say, it was definitely something that we knew could be drawn as a parallel, but I think it really came into the forefront in the making of the film, in our editing process and our conversations around the greater context and story and narrative of what this piece is. And it stopped being so much a film about 5 guys on bikes and more opening up to those greater conversations. But it was present in our minds, but I don't think it was, at least for me, I didn't imagine that it would become so paralleled in the film as probably what it is now. Yeah.
Another question that we've got from one of our viewers, Sandra, did you buy new guitars after the trip? After you had to ditch the ones that you sold?
No, I think we got rid of our bike. Well, I got rid of my bike like 2 days after I finished, and we did not buy new instruments. We were all pretty over everything to do with that. I mean, it was an amazing journey, but we were pretty done with bikes and guitars and probably each other for a few years.
Does anybody still cycle regularly?
I ride that same bike that I did the Bikes of Wrath with and on. I returned it back to Melbourne on Qantas, and I ride it around town most days to get from A to B, but I do not tour cycle anyway.
Nice.
I've had my fill.
Another question from one Mikey Hill. In one word, can you describe the first shower you had in Bakersfield? And he noted hyphenated words are permitted.
I was just, muddy, like the sheer amount of mud that came off our bodies.
It was underwhelming.
Underwhelming?
Well, I say that because it was 5 of us in one hotel room, and I probably got the queue. So it's still great, but it was a pretty rank shower by that time.
Fantastic. Let's see here. Another question from Marianne. The Dust Bowl was created by environmental mismanagement. Today's EPA and the administration are planning significant backstepping on environmental regulations. This is a parallel I see, even if it's not the focus of the film. If you just want to speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably something there's so many things we could cover in this film, and that was a kind of, one of the things that we maybe, could have given a bit more time to, but it's hard to fit, everything into 100 minutes. But yeah, I mean, I live in Texas now, and I'm going up to the Panhandle a lot at the moment, which is, where we pass through Amarillo, Wheeler, Texas, that area. And I also think that's kind of disheartening. I mean, it seems like in that area, at least, there hasn't been that much learnt from, you know, what this total disastrous environmental event caused back in the 1930s, and what's going on up there now. And, you know, there's like the use of their grasslands and drying up the aquifers up there. And it's kind of I find it disheartening to see, you know, this calamity in the 1930s because we didn't look after the land, and the farming practices weren't what they should have been. And I don't want to pick on just the Texas Panhandle. I'm sure it's very similar in Bakersfield and the Central Valley in California. But it doesn't seem sustainable, at least to me, and what I've heard and what I've read and people I've spoken to up in that area. So I agree. It's a shame that we haven't really learnt that environmental lesson.
Yeah. Yeah. History has that way of repeating it just culturally. And, well, and just to pivot a little bit, we have a question from Wendy about how many hours of film did you shoot? And I also just wanted to ask kind of a process question to you, Cam, about how much footage you guys shot, and then the editing, like what was a little bit of your process in whittling that down?
So we shot 160 hours of material, which was predominantly with one camera, but we had 2 cameras on the road, and the second camera was designed as a B camera for the remaining 4 of us to pick it up and kind of grab some B-roll. But Red was doing the majority of the filming, and obviously data management along the road was quite hectic because we didn't want to lose anything. So yeah, we brought it all back, 160 hours of material, and I think Charlie and I just stared at it for quite a while and weren't really sure what it was or what to turn it into. And then it's one of those things that if you just show up every day and you become more and more familiar with the material, it starts to tell you what it wants to be. And that there was a turning point at some point where it was like, this is what it is. And then we just couldn't edit fast enough. We were just going at that point. And so it was originally cut, always was going to be a feature-length film, but we cut it as a 6-part, 6 by 50-minute television series, as well as the feature. So the process was to kind of cut the episodic versions first, and then you have such a familiarity with the material that the process was simply to put those 6 episodes together, and inherently we knew what scenes had to go and which were the ones that had to stay. And next thing you know, you've got an hour 40 long film. And the cutting from the series down to the feature took about 5 days, which is pretty crazy. Yeah, we just knew it so well by that point. It was pretty clear what was going to make it into the film, what had to be in the film. Like meeting Joe at the 1 hour point was the only anchor that I was certain of. It was like, we must meet Joe an hour into the film. That's kind of the pivotal moment. And so everything kind of before that and after that is anchored around that moment.
I want to get back to Joe, but also a question from Susie, which kind of ties in. You know, did anything crazy happen that you couldn't show in the film and that you can tell us about now? So in that cutting process, was there something that got cut out that you just want to maybe talk about now?
Nothing got cut out. Sorry, go, Charlie.
Yeah, I was just probably going to say what you're going to say, Cam. I mean, not to sanitize the film or anything like that. I mean, nothing happened. Really, I mean, people are generally surprised to hear this, but every encounter we had was a positive one. I mean, it was just incredible. Really, we didn't cut anything out or edit anything to kind of create the message of the film or to hone it into what we wanted it to be. It was just genuinely a really positive experience for us. I mean, there are some really powerful moments that unfortunately couldn't fit into the feature film. One in Hinckley, California, which again is near the Mojave Desert. We had a kind of incredible night there with the locals. That's of course where the PG&E contamination of the aquifers took place, and that's the Aaron Brockovich film. So that night was awesome. And then a bunch of others. We met, 10 times the amount of people you see in the film, and they all were incredible and had great stories. So unfortunately, that kind of stuff, you got to pick and choose.
Yeah.
But maybe there's a way to share a link or speak to Bethany about if people are interested in seeing the 6-part series, like all the stuff, that Hinckley scene that Charlie speaks of in California, that's probably half the episode of episode 5 or 6.
Yeah, so if people are interested in watching more, we'll follow up.
And you get to spend a lot more time with people like Ben, Ed, and Leanne, and more time with Joe on the side of the road, and a lot of the characters who were super special to us that you just can't squeeze everyone into a feature-length film. But that's the beauty of the series, is you kind of get to go on the longer version of this journey.
Amazing. Yeah. I did want to touch on Joe, because it's just such a powerful scene and encounter, and it's just difficult. I'm sure it was very difficult for you guys. So I wanted to ask a bit how that encounter affected the group, and a little bit about how that decision was made. How that decision was made to call the authorities.
It's still pretty clear in my mind. Like I remember we were riding, and it was a bit of a blur. I looked to my right, and there was somebody there, and he just said, "Can I have some water?" And next thing you know, it's like, "Oh wow, this guy's not in good shape." And so we all kind of doubled back and spent some time with him, and it became apparent quite quickly that he was mentally ill. But we were also offering ideas up on how to maybe get him back to some level of safety, and it became apparent that he really didn't have anywhere to go. And I guess it reached a point where it was like, if we ride on, he might not make it. So I think Leon, just with his experience as a firefighter and crisis management, and really understanding how to handle a situation like that. I mean, I have more and more respect for that every time I watch it. At the time, I was pretty rattled that the call was made, because it's not what we told Joe was going to happen. And so when the ambulance arrived, he looked at me and he's like, "What have you done?" And I'm like, "I'm so sorry. I genuinely didn't know." But there was sort of two things going on. And then, respectfully, it's like, that was the right decision, and that's the experience of, like Charlie and Ollie and Leon are all from Outward Bound, and probably just have a better awareness and understanding of situations like that. And then Leon, freshly, he'd been in the fire department like a handful of years at that point, and is a very intelligent guy when it comes to those sorts of situations. I think we as a group handled it well, but it was devastating, because after that it was like, where is he? Has he been gobbled up by the system? Is he in? He did not want to get sent to an asylum. Simple things like the ambulance, who's paying for that? How does that happen? So it rattled us for quite some time, and then we aired the film. We screened the film in Albuquerque, which is 20 miles from where we met Joe on the side of the road, and we screened it at an opening night of the Albuquerque Film and Music Festival there, and we kind of got up on stage and did a Q&A afterwards, and we were trying to find out if anyone recognized him or if anyone knew anything about him, and to this day, like, we've probably done close to 400 screens predominantly through America with this film, and we haven't got any word on Joe or where he is or if he's still with us. So it's a really heartbreaking scene, and I don't think it's ever going to be easy to watch.
Yeah. Amazing that you guys tried to find him. That's pretty incredible. So some more questions from viewers. Similar to the question I asked about taking the trip as a woman, but from Wendy, do you think there would have been a difference in your experience and how you were treated if you were part of a minority group, Hispanic, African American? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's a question we rightfully get, pretty much at every screening. And for us, I personally don't have an answer. I imagine, some of those experiences would have been different. Yeah. And that's a real shame. And again, we all felt, and we acknowledged this on the trip and talked to each other about it, that we were lucky to be able, not just lucky to be able to go out on a whim and cycle halfway across America, but lucky that we felt safe being able to do that. I will say I don't know, how the people we met would have treated someone with different skin color or a different gender differently. I in my heart, and I know these people well, and I have been back to Wheeler, and I've met up with a lot of these people, as has Cam, multiple times since the film. And, people like, for example, Bennett and Leanne are just good, decent people that would help anyone. And I'm 100% convinced that that's the case. So, I can't say it comprehensively or, 100% of the experience would have been the same, but I know that a lot of those people we met were really genuine, good people. And, I feel and I hope that they would have treated a different set of writers in the same way.
Yeah.
The usual response is Bennett and Leanne, yes. Buckskin Dan, probably not.
Yeah.
I don't think Buckskin Dan would have invited us back to his property, his fenced off barbed wire community. If we were not white. I think it's as clear cut as that. But, Ben and Leanne, as Charlie said, like, they're pillars of their community. They've brought in, like, over the years, how many sort of foster kids have they had through their place? And a lot of them
they've fostered 3 or 4 Latino kids, like illegal immigrants in Wheeler, Texas, and they have, they really are pillars of that community.
Yeah. They're extraordinary humans.
That is, is really worth seeing when you get into a tiny town like Wheeler. It's amazing what you will find.
A couple of questions. Both Sandra and Richard are curious about Trump, about, where you when you did this journey was kind of on the brink of the timing, so your trip was pre-election. So your sense of the politics of the time and of the people that you were encountering, and was it kind of a surprise to you that he won the election? Not to get too personal into your own personal life, but, getting a sense of that time and the place with the election going on. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we started, and as we started, it must have been a few weeks before that Trump announced that he was running for the presidency. And I think everyone, well, I know I certainly thought it was a bit of a joke at the time. And there's that one scene where we kind of laugh him off when we're watching, he's on TV and we're in a room and we kind of dismiss his chances. So that's probably an insight into at least the way I thought about it. I think on the ground, and maybe this is still the same today, maybe not, but there was, I think, a real apathy with federal, like national politics, Washington, D.C. I got a sense that people thought that, rightly or wrongly, that the government did very little for them and their communities, and they had to look out for one another. And you do get a sense, I think, that what was interesting to us, and it came up with Joe, is that people were very willing to support other people that they knew within their community, and they would do a lot to help out within their small town. But then once you got outside of that town and you come across someone like Joe, there wasn't that same level of empathy and compassion. So yeah, I feel like there was kind of a who care? Like, Washington DC is corrupt. They're not helping me on a day-to-day level. We're in this together as a community, and we're going to help each other out. And that seemed to be, I think, the mindset that I picked up on.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I feel like, as Charlie said, small towns are about community. They're about looking out for one another, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And I think it's a bit of a privilege to sometimes be able to just step back and look at what the country needs, because often you're doing what's required to keep your community alive and afloat. And what we learned on the Bikes of Wrath was that, you know, I got a sense that, yeah, these towns want to bring jobs back. They want to create some more industry. And here's this businessman coming in who's kind of going to drain the swamp, and he's going to, you know, bring jobs back to these towns and communities that desperately need work. So like it's not as black and white as it comes across when you're on the outside looking in. Like when you travel through these places, there's a genuine reason and sense that this could be good for us, you know, and I think that's what this film has managed to achieve across some of the bluer states in America. People watch it and they're like, wow, these are people kind of like me, and this makes a bit more sense to me. And I've written off these parts of my own country in the past, but watching a film and getting to know people through this documentary experience has allowed them to sort of see it from another perspective and another sort of group of people's point of view. Yeah. That if you vote for Trump, therefore you are this, and it's like it's a lot more complicated and nuanced than that.
Yeah, and your film is quite nuanced. Yeah, so I think you've done well in that regard, and showing us part of America that we don't normally get to see if we maybe live on the coast, or yeah, I think you're breaking down so many of those stereotypes. So well done.
Oh, thanks.
An anonymous, what percentage of people did you encounter that were familiar with the Grapes of Wrath? Did you choose what the people, you show them reading from the book? Did you choose those segments, or did they choose those segments themselves?
So pretty much everyone in Oklahoma was familiar with not only the novel, but had a family member or a story of a family member that had gone across to California during the Dust Bowl. So yeah, I mean, it is still very much in the kind of sense of place in Oklahoma and sense of people and their identity. I think, almost everyone we spoke to had a story about the Dust Bowl and knew the book. And interestingly, a lot of people didn't really like the book, and they were pretty annoyed at John Steinbeck for, as one guy said, painting them as Okies. And, some of them were annoyed that the book was about people that left Oklahoma, and, the strong ones in their opinion were the people that stayed in Oklahoma and scratched out a living and survived. But as we went across to California, New Mexico, not as much knowledge of the book. Arizona, maybe even less. And then as we got back into Bakersfield, there was, of course, a lot of knowledge of the book, and a lot of people had, those personal first-hand accounts or second-hand accounts of their family members making the journey during the Dust Bowl.
And to the book readings. We started out on the road kind of, the first couple of days we read a section of a chapter to each other around, our camp spot. And then I think one night when we stayed at Ben and Leanne's place, the idea was that Ben Ed could read a little passage. But after that, we were like, this book's 450 pages long. We don't know what we're going to need. So, I mean, hopefully it's not something that we hide, but hopefully it's woven in seamlessly. We went back 2 years later with specific book readings that we wanted from each of the characters that we knew had made it into the film, and which paragraphs we knew we needed in particular beats and sections of the film to tie the whole journey together. So we went back with a very specific sort of Excel spreadsheet. This person will read this paragraph, this one will read this one. And then we had a 2-week reverse journey in a car to go and film these pickup sections.
How was that, going back to 2 years later?
Beautiful and sad. Like it was everything. It was like getting to see these people again, and it was just in very different circumstances, I think. But seeing Ben and Leanne again and staying at their place. We went back to Hinckley, the town that Charlie was talking about, which is depicted in the Aaron Brockovich film, and we showed them their scene which isn't in the film, but it's in the series. We'd cut that scene together and we sat around with a laptop at the bar. So this town has about 15 people in it, and they're all at the bar every night. And we went in and we put the laptop down and we hit spacebar, and it was a really emotional experience because they'd seen their town and their struggle depicted in this long scene of what we'd captured 2 years prior, and they were pointing out faces and people that had moved on, and some people had passed away, and it was a really kind of difficult experience because we didn't that's the other thing. When you've done a trip like that, you've got such fond memories and you're on such a high of what that trip was, and you can't replicate that when you come back through those towns. It's a different experience. You're in a car, you've got a schedule, you've got a purpose specifically to get this, and this. So it was kind of bittersweet in places and quite melancholy in others, but there were definitely connections that were reinforced, like the Ben, Ed and Leanne connection, and a bunch of people that we hadn't seen in a couple of years.
Wow. That's amazing. A question from Wayne. Are you in touch with anyone from the journey that you met?
Yeah, I mean, in touch with a number of people, probably, as I've mentioned a few times tonight. The closest is with Ben, Ed and Leanne. So I live in Austin, Texas now, and so do their son and nephew, and I'm very good friends with their son and nephew, and I went up to their place for Christmas a few years ago and see them, at least twice a year. So that's kind of the most frequent kind of connection I have with anyone from the film. But it's great. I mean, they're just exceptional people, and they came to the premiere of this film 2 years ago in Colorado, and that will be a lifelong friendship, which is pretty amazing.
That's awesome. Well, it looks like we're about that time. So last question. I just want to ask if you're working on anything new and what you guys are working on now.
Yeah, we are. We're actually in production on a documentary film that is set in Amarillo, Texas. And the first time either Cam and I saw Amarillo, Texas was on the ride, and we're actually working with Graham Hillhouse, so Ben, Ed and Leanne's nephew. So there's a decent connection to the Bikes of Wrath there. It's a film about a kind of semi-well-known arts patron, quite an eccentric guy from Amarillo, Texas, and this kind of cast of characters that he was surrounded by. And it gets a little dark, and it's an interesting, complex tale. But this time we're behind the cameras. We're not in the film, and it's a nice change. So we're working on that.
It's just great.
We'll be finished up shooting in the next few months, and then we'll see when and how it gets released.
Amazing. Where can we follow you if we're interested?
That's a great question.
This one's kind of a little under the rug at the moment, so there's no like official Facebook page or anything for it. We're out there making it right now, but that's a little sneak peek right there.
Yeah, I mean, we have. I'm just trying to think. You could probably follow the Bikes of Wrath Facebook account. I'm sure we'll post something on there one day.
We'll spin off from that for sure.
Yeah, we'll cross from that for sure. But yeah.
Thank you guys so much. I want to remind folks that the film is playing for another week on Rafael at Home. So if you guys watch the Q&A first and ate dessert before the main, go back and it's playing for another week. And other things, great Q&As and films coming up. Tomorrow we have a Q&A for The Gift, just Gift rather, at 7 p.m. tomorrow with the director Robin McKenna, so definitely check that out. Thank you both so much. You guys are just, it's been a pleasure talking to you, and thank you for everyone that tuned in and asked questions. We are just loving this new Zoom digital engagement. We appreciate you. Everybody stay safe out there, wash your hands, can't wait until we can do this in real life.
In real life.
Thanks so much for watching, everyone.
Thanks, Esther. Yeah, thanks for watching, everyone.
Thanks for putting this
See you soon.
See you soon. Bye.
Okay, bye.